Imagine a stretch of ocean so vast it could swallow entire nations, a sea shimmering under the sun, filled with fish, and hiding beneath its waves, treasures worth trillions in oil and gas. Now imagine two countries, with centuries of history and pride, staring across those waters, and both declaring, "This is ours." That is the South China Sea, and it has become one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the world. For the Philippines and China, this isn't just about water. It's about sovereignty, survival, and identity. And tonight, we dive into why these two nations are locked in a tense battle over this sea, and why the outcome matters far beyond Asia. The South China Sea covers over 3.5 million square kilometers. It touches the coasts of multiple countries: Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, and China. But for the Philippines, this part of the ocean is known as the West Philippine Sea. International law gives the Philippines rights to explore and use waters within 200 nautical miles of its shores, something called an exclusive economic zone. Yet, China, pointing to an old map known as the 9-line, claims nearly the entire sea, stretching thousands of kilometers from its mainland and overlapping with the Philippine zone. The result: two overlapping maps, two competing truths, and a sea turned into a chessboard. Why does it matter so much? First, trade. About 1/3 of global shipping passes through these waters. Oil tankers, cargo ships, and war vessels all use this route. Control over it means influence over global trade itself. Second, resources. The sea is one of the richest fishing grounds in the world, providing food and livelihood for millions. Beneath the seabed lies oil and natural gas, enough to fuel economies for decades. For both China and the Philippines, giving up these waters isn't just about losing resources, it's about losing the future. The roots of this conflict run deep. China's 9-line first appeared on maps in the mid-20th century. It wasn't internationally recognized, but for Beijing, it became a symbol of historic rights. Meanwhile, the Philippines, having gained independence in 19, gradually built its case under modern international law. By the 1970s, it began claiming the Spratly Islands and other features close to its coast. Then, in 1982, came a game changer: the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, according to this treaty, every coastal country gets an exclusive economic zone of 200 nautical miles. By that measure, much of the sea China claims actually falls inside the Philippines' legal zone. But law and reality often collide. On the water, things get tense fast. Take 2000, when Philippine and Chinese ships confronted each other at Scarborough Shoal. The shoal lies just 120 nautical miles from Luzon, well within the Philippine zone. Filipino fishermen had used it for generations. Yet after the standoff, China effectively took control, blocking Filipinos from entering and patrolling it with larger Coast Guard ships. That incident wasn't just a loss of territory, it was a blow to ordinary lives. Fishermen who once fed families from those waters suddenly found themselves outmatched by ships flying another flag. Then came something even more dramatic: island building. In the past decade, China has dredged up sand and rock to transform reefs in the Spratly Islands into artificial islands, complete with runways, radar systems, and military facilities. Where once there were only shallow waters and corals, now stand fortified bases. To the Philippines and its allies, these aren't just islands, they're stepping stones for power projection, changing the balance in one of the busiest seas in the world. Faced with this, the Philippines decided to fight not with ships, but with law. In 2013, it brought a case against China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. 3 years later, the verdict came. China's 9-line had no legal basis. The court ruled that the Philippines had sovereign rights over its exclusive economic zone. It even declared China's actions against Filipino fishermen unlawful. For Manila, it was a huge victory on paper. But here's the problem. Courts have no armies. China rejected the ruling outright, calling it meaningless. On the ground, or rather, on the water, nothing changed. Chinese ships still patrolled, Filipino fishermen still faced blockades, and the standoff continued. And yet, This dispute is not just about Manila and Beijing. The South China Sea has drawn in bigger players. The United States, a longtime ally of the Philippines, regularly sends warships through these waters, calling it freedom of navigation. Japan, Australia, and even European navies occasionally join, signaling that the world sees the South China Sea as a global commons, not a private lake. Each time an American destroyer sails near Chinese-built islands, it sends a message. The world is watching. The Philippines, meanwhile, has shifted its strategy depending on who's in charge. Under President Benigno Aquino, it pursued the court case, taking the legal route. Under President Rodrigo Duterte, ties with China softened, as he sought investment and loans in exchange for downplaying the ruling. But under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the tide turned again. He welcomed stronger ties with the United States, even granting new bases for American troops, while at the same time filing diplomatic protests against China. These shifts revealed the Philippines' dilemma. Should it resist China, cooperate with it, or try to balance both? For the Philippines, the stakes are enormous. Millions of Filipinos rely on fish from these waters for food and livelihood. The promise of oil and gas could one day help power its economy, and beyond economics. This is about sovereignty. To lose control of the West Philippine Sea would feel like losing a part of the nation itself. For ordinary fishermen, it's not geopolitics, it's their daily bread. For China, the stakes are just as high. The South China Sea is tied to its sense of national pride and history. Many in China see the Nandash Line as proof of ancient rights, a legacy they cannot abandon. Strategically, controlling these waters keeps potential rivals, especially the United States, farther from China's coast. And economically, the fish, oil, and shipping lanes feed into China's long-term growth and security. For Beijing, the South China Sea is not just a question of territory, it's a cornerstone of its rise as a global power. So where does this leave the future? Analysts see three possible paths. The first is escalation. More standoffs, more ships shadowing each other, more near. Every year, Coast Guard vessels from both sides come dangerously close to ramming, raising the risk of accidental conflict. The second path is negotiation. Some form of joint exploration or shared resource management, though mistrust makes that hard. The third is a balance of power. Ongoing tension, but managed through diplomacy and the presence of outside powers like the United States, ensuring no one side dominates completely. War. Most experts say a full-scale war is unlikely. The risks are simply too high for both sides. But gray zone, conflict, intimidation, blockades, harassment is likely to continue. The South China Sea may never be peaceful, but it may remain contained, a battlefield of pressure rather than outright firepower. And so, when we ask, why are the Philippines and China locked in this tense battle? The answer is layered. It is about law and history. It is about fish and oil. It is about sovereignty and national pride. For the Philippines, these waters are life and independence. For China, they are history and strategy. And in the middle lies a sea that carries not just cargo ships, but the weight of global power. As the waves crash against disputed shoals, and as fishermen cast their nets under the shadow of larger ships, one thing is clear. The South China Sea is not just a sea. It is a mirror reflecting rivalry, resilience, and the human desire to claim and protect what we believe is ours. And as long as that desire burns, the South China Sea showdown will continue.